In this recording, we're going to review how to graph equations in slope-intercept form. I know it says here writing equations in slope-intercept form. Let's actually cross that out and make it graphing. All right, so slope-intercept form is this form here, this y equals mx plus b form that we've talked about. Let's go ahead and write that in. That if we can get it in this form, it's going to be easy for us to identify the slope and the y-intercept, and then pretty easy for us to make a graph of it. So again, m is the slope. We've talked about this in other classes, where m, why is it not s if it represents slope? M is from the French monter or something like that, monter, which means to go up. B is the y-intercept. You might say, why B? Why not another letter? Well, it's common to use, like if we're talking about a quadratic, we just kind of go in order ax squared plus bx plus c, going in order of the letters. Well, if we used ax plus b, that would make sense here, but because we're using m for slope, it's just sort of the agreed upon letter, right? So I think you're comfortable with this. If you know a little bit, why don't you go ahead and work out 1 through 4, identifying the slope and the y-intercept. If you'd like to see one of them worked out, I can work out one of them with you. But if you're ready, go ahead and pause and work these out. Otherwise, I'll work one out with you. Okay, so let's work out number 2. The slope is the coefficient of x if it's in slope-intercept form, so it would be negative 2/3. The y-intercept is the b value, the constant, because the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, where x equals 0, right? So if I sub in a 0, this whole thing goes away. I'm just left with y equals -5. So I'm going to always write the y-intercept as a point. So the x is 0, and the y is -5. Okay, go ahead and work out 1, 3, and 4. Play the recording when you're ready. Okay, so the slope for number 1 is 3. You could write it as 3 over 1, but let's not complicate things. Y-intercept is 0, 7. Slope for number 3 is 1/3. Y-intercept is 0, 43. Again, it's a point, right? So I always write it as a xy coordinate. And finally, for part 4, -8 is our slope. Y-intercept at 0, -15. Right, so how do we graph such a thing? How do we graph a line like this? Well, the best way, the easiest way, is to just get your one point on there, like a starting point. That's our y-intercept. Plot that. All right, once you have a starting point, if you have a rate, that slope is like a rate, use the slope. Again, the slope can be thought of as rise over run. So if it's not a fraction, you can make it one, right? You can always say it's 3 or 3 over 1, right? And then our y-intercept would be -4 with an x of 0. And then we just draw the line. We draw the line to connect the various points that we're going to plot. Okay, so for example, we're gonna graph this line. Let's graph number 1 together. We're gonna graph this line that starts at 0, -4. So we're gonna go down to -4 and plot a starting point. That's our starting point on the y-axis. From there, we're gonna use the rate, which says, okay, to get more points, rise of 3, run of 1. Rise of 3 is easy. 1, 2, 3. The question is, where's a run? Well, run means go in the positive x direction, so to the right. So up 3, to the right 1. If it had been a negative slope, we'd be going in this direction. So positive slopes go up as we move to the larger values of x. Negative slopes do the opposite. Okay, so I just plot all the points till I run out of room. Then I take a line or straight edge. and they should all line up. If they don't, fix one of them. And I want you to put arrowheads, right? Try arrowheads on there. Okay. Could you work out number 6, please, and play the recording when you're ready? Okay, so hopefully you took time to do this. There's a implied 1. That's the coefficient here. So our slope is 1. Our y-intercept is also 1, but I'm going to write it as a point, 0, 1. Okay. If you got that far but didn't make the graph yet, go ahead and make the graph and then play the recording when you're ready. So there's the graph for number 6. Moving to the next page, let's have you do number 7 on your own, then play the recording when you're ready. Okay, so hopefully you worked out number 7 already. If not, please do so. Okay, so there's our slope and our y-intercept. We go down 1, over 2. Remember, over means to the right. This is a negative slope direction. Okay. Okay, we'll leave number 8 for another time. Okay, so I believe you are ready for another challenge here. You're getting pretty comfortable with graphing lines. We've reviewed that, right? It's something you knew from before. Well, how about if the equation is not in slope-intercept form? So how can we work with that? Well, basically we want to manipulate that, and I find that's one of the more challenging things because it's abstract, but we can get there, right? We've done hard stuff before. We can do this. We're going to try to get this equation so that the y is by itself, because if it's in this form we call y equals mx plus b, we can identify the slope and the y-intercept. So let's do that here. So I got to figure out what I need to do to get y by itself. So I'm doing some little self-talk here. So I see that there's a plus x there, which I do not want. So I'm going to undo that plus x by subtracting x from both sides. All right, so go ahead and subtract x from both sides. All right, so those add to 0, and I've just got y equals. Now I've got some choices here in terms of how I represent this. I certainly could write 5 minus x. That would not be wrong, but I would like to put it in the more customary form so I can see the slope and the y-intercept. So I'm going to write it as minus, in fact, I'm just going to write minus x or negative x. I'm going to write negative 1x. That way I can see that number that is the coefficient, plus 5. All right. Now it's in slope-intercept form. I know what to do from there. So see if you can finish this one out. Play the recording when you're ready. Okay, so hopefully you proceeded to find the slope to be negative 1 and your y-intercept to be 0, 5. And if you haven't done so, please make this graph. All right, so hopefully you took time to make this graph. Please use that pause button. That's the only way to learn, right, is to do it on your own. All right, so let's try number 10 together. So number 10, well, again, I want to get it, let's just sort of write our frame up here. Our y equals mx plus b. That's the form I want to get it in. But there's a couple things going on along with the y. I see a multiplication by negative 5, and I see a 3x. Well, the 3x, even though there's a negative afterwards, the 3x is actually being added, right, to the negative 5y, because there's a plus essentially in front of that 3x. There's no minus. So I want to undo that 3x by subtracting 3x from both sides. That's going to add to 0. Of course, I have to add to the right side as well, right? Or subtract. Okay, so I got a negative 5y is what's left on the left on the left. What's left on the right side, again, I'm going to write these in the proper order, or the customary order, I should say. There's no correct order, but why not do it in such a way that we'll recognize, right? And now I'm going to undo this multiplication by negative 5. I want to undo that by dividing by negative 5, right? That's its inverse operation. Those divide to 1. Now I'll individually divide each one of these terms by -5. Okay, so let's rewrite what's left. Okay, y equals, well, 3 doesn't divide well by 5, but I can say negative over a negative is a positive. So 3/5 x, and this does divide well. Okay, so we kind of set it up nicely. All right, so it looks like a 3/5 slope and a 0, -2 for our y-intercept. All right, go ahead and graph that. Play the recording when you're ready. All right, now the final one I'd like you to try to do on your own. I'd like you to do this one completely on your own. Play the recording to get help or to check your answer, please. Okay, so hopefully you took the time to work this one completely out. Subtract 2x adds to 0. I'm going to divide by -3 by all the terms. That divides to 1. That makes a positive 2/3. That makes a -2. Slope is 2/3. Y-intercept is 0, -2. All right, so if you got that far but didn't make a graph, please make a graph. And that's that. Thanks for watching.